Thank you for tuning in for another edition of the Business Breakdown, where we break down the most important business topics for business owners, leaders, and entrepreneurs. Back again with your host, Dena Davis from Davis Hill Consulting. And I'm excited to announce I have a special guest here with me today. I have Ben Szweda from Szweda Consulting here based in Cleveland. So Ben, welcome to the Business Breakdown. Would you please introduce yourself to our guests?
Thank you. I'm the owner of Szweda Consulting. We're based here. We handle QuickBooks Online, bookkeeping, and payroll processing for all different types of small businesses, both here in the Cleveland area and in about 9 other states so far. We also do end-of-year taxes for businesses and individuals.
Well, this is going to be a great conversation. I'm really looking forward to it. And this is one of the things that a lot of people don't really know is how close HR and accounting work together. So hopefully we can share a little bit of that insight in terms of our partnership internally when you're running a business, when you're making decisions. A lot of times I call it neck and neck in terms of being able to assess what's going on and be able to offer recommendations. So I'm really excited to have you on the show today.
Thank you.
So the topic that we have today that we want to do a deep dive in, and this is something that both Ben and we get a lot of questions on in our own respective right, is what's the difference between an independent consultant and a full-time employee? And then I think the subsequent question to that that's really in close order is also, when should I hire? And so I think we can tackle both of these topics from both perspectives. So let's start with the first. What is the difference between an independent contractor and a full-time employee? So I'll let you take that one, Ben. I'll let you give your spin and I'll add some commentary to it.
All right. So as background, the independent contractor is the one that you're just paying by check. You're not withholding any taxes. It's not going through a formal payroll company. And the employee obviously would be getting a W-2 at the end of the year with all different types of taxes already withheld. So a lot of people like to do the former option because they aren't paying that employer payroll tax, but you can't just pick whichever one you want. There are rules set out by the IRS to determine if someone fits the definition of a contractor or an employee. And some of those rules are subjective. There's different questions you can ask yourself to kind of, first being, how much control do you have over the person? Do you control when they work, where they work? Have you bought their equipment for them, their laptop? Do you provide them different tools and supplies for their job? Do you offer benefits that go along with employment, insurance, vacation, things like that? If you're doing that, you probably have an employee situation, not a contractor situation. I always use myself as an example when telling my clients, how to decide this. And so for me, I bought my own computer. I work at my own house, whatever time of the day I want to. And I have lots of other clients, so I'm not just working for you. So those are some of the indications to help you decide.
Absolutely. And I like the fact that you talked about the gray space, because there really is a lot of subjectivity in the definition that they give for an independent contractor versus an FTE. Some of the other things that come to mind in my world on the HR side, like you said, you talked about the control. So how much control do you have over the person's work? Are they coming in to offer that, or are you asking them to, say, fit inside a particular set of processes, procedures, et cetera? The other thing I think about is the duration of time that you're looking to hire someone. So if it's something that's project-based, where it has a clear beginning and an end, and the roles are scoped very clearly in terms of what you're there to deliver, that also can give you a little bit of framework to make that decision whether it should be an independent contractor or an FTE. Now, later on, hopefully we'll get into some of the funding of all of this, but, just that initial determination, it's very important. And, I always tell folks too, is it's not as if someone calls 911 and the police run into your business and say, wait, you have somebody as an independent contractor and they should be an FTE, you're going to go to jail. Like, it's not that dramatic. And, it's not that, it's not like a sitcom or like Law and Order where something happens. But
it's not that dramatic, but you do want to make the right decision up front, because if your employee would complain, there is a process where the employee can ask the IRS to make a determination. So if the employee does that, or if it gets found out, you could be responsible for payroll taxes that you didn't pay. And what you were saying, it is subjective, because some of those questions we went through, you could answer yes to some and no to others. So you kind of do have to go through them all, analyze them, and make a decision based on that. And relationship, how long they will continue, definitely is part of that as well. And is the work a key part? Person do.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and those are some of the things that I think about on a regular basis as well. And, I also think about like I said, we'll go back to the duration, because one of the things that created issues a few years ago as it relates to this are like Microsoft, and that actually was the Microsoft case. So I think it was, I can't remember now how long it's been, but it's been quite some time. And that actually was what created a lot of emphasis on independent contractor versus FTE in today's conversation. This was a huge part of the basis for why there was so much focus on it. So the tech companies would hire people that into intern programs, and the interns were being asked to do all kind of work, and of course either do it for free or at a very low cost. Now, depending on your age, when we were coming out of school, it was almost the expectation that interns were not going to be paid, whereas this case actually changed a lot of that, and it also put more visibility into some of the risk of you not classifying your employees properly. And really what it came down to is there's the payroll exposure that you talked about, but there's also benefit eligibility that, and again, benefit plans, they all have their own different rules to them, but there's also an equity component there too. So I'm asking you to do the same work, same everything under the same conditions, but you don't get some of the other benefits that you would normally give to an FTE. So have you seen situations like that, Ben?
Right. Calling someone a contractor can prevent you from having to contribute to their 401k, for example. So a lot of times, it can, of course, be done properly, but a lot of times it can be a way that the company doesn't have to spend so much money on the person. So you just have to have, your basis for your decision outlined and that you could explain it.
Yeah. And I think the other thing I will say just from the HR perspective is make sure you know your benefit programs, because certain things are governed by different bodies like 401k, pensions, anything on the financial services side. There are specific rules and guidelines of even within their regs of what an employee is versus not. And so, like, for instance, if you have a 401k or a pension or you're paying into, you can actually put those plans at risk by not adding people to it that actually have eligibility.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like I said, I try not to scare people because, especially in the HR world, they always think we're here to ruin their lives anyway. But, the reality is it's just, I think, good practice and due diligence to have these conversations up front and to bring it to your HR professional as well as your accountant. And let's look at it from all angles and make sure that you're comfortable and clear with the business decision that you're making so that you don't fall into any kind of unplanned expenses or other kind of pitfalls. So
definitely. Ben, and I would warn your employees as well, there should be some document that they sign, even if they're not an employee. There should be some contract, and in there you should have some sentence about not withholding taxes, because people sometimes get surprised when the end of the year comes and they haven't made any estimated payments on all this money that you've been paying them. So there should be somewhere in one of the agreements that you have them sign should be something saying, we're not withholding anything because of how you've been classified. It's your responsibility.
Exactly. And see, this is why I love how this conversation flows, because you're talking about things in my world, which are called offer letters, statement of work. You also, like you said, you have maybe even an agreement. I might have like I might have a partnership. There's different ways that you can structure these agreements in terms of how we get work done. And so when I look at that, especially a lot of small businesses, sometimes they forego some of the more formal HR types of practices because they're, oh, I'm not that big. I don't really need that. I just sent them something in an email. Okay, that, like I said, there's no police that are going to come and tackle you.
Right.
But on the other hand, again, these are we'll call them like insurance policies where they help to protect or mitigate risk to your business. And so that is very important to me when I hear that, because first and foremost, not only being clear with the person you're hiring, but even when I'm recruiting, that can make a very big difference in who is interested in the type of work that I have. There are people
absolutely.
Because they, like you said, they don't want to have the burden of paying taxes on their own, and they may not be open to an IC type of arrangement.
Need the W-2, whether it's to get a mortgage or an apartment, you need that document. So it's definitely important to be upfront.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure thing. So can you think of any other tips or ideas or thoughts that you think business owners should be mindful of when they're making that determination?
Well, related to this is the W-9 form and the 1099 contract. Along with the things you were mentioning, the office, have that W-9 form in that packet of paperwork. Get that filled out before you even pay. Your accountant will need it in January when filling out the 1099, which are due on January 31st. That's informing the person how much money they were paid. And those forms are required if you pay them over $600. And they're very hard to get after the fact, I have found. So make sure you get that up front. And if you're a payroll company to process these payments, that might be built into that electronic workflow. The one that I use, you can send an invitation by email to your contractor. They can sign up, put in their bank information where they want to get paid, and they're forced to fill in at the same time. So that's an option as well instead of the paperwork.
Yeah, and that's a really important part, because I know, especially different consulting engagements that I've been in, especially with smaller businesses, when you go into the file, quote unquote, there is no record of the W-9.
Right.
And that literally should be the first thing that, if you talk about forms and paperwork, of course we have the statements of work and all that other, but that should be right in that packet, like you're saying, and make sure that those two things are together, because that is what's going to drive all of those transactions at the end that are going to be able to pull all the data from your system.
Right. You definitely need that. It's not your responsibility when they get it, but it is your responsibility as the business owner to issue it if they have hit that $600 threshold. And if you're not sure about the EIN or the social that they're giving you, there is with the IRS to make sure that it's matching their records before you get too far into that relationship.
Yeah, that's a great point. I didn't know that, actually, that you could double check the EIN or the social just to make sure. That's, I think, another good point too.
Sometimes we'll have letters come from the IRS saying that you didn't submit the 1099 with a EIN that matched the person's name or their company name. And then there's a whole backup withholding problem that arises. But to just avoid all that, no one wants a letter from the IRS. To avoid getting it in the first place as they come in, the system turns it around pretty quickly if you're doing it, like right now in the middle of the year. If you try and verify them all in January, a lot of people are doing it then. So it might take a bit of time, but now's a perfect time to do that. You'll get a result within the week.
Absolutely. Well, we are at our first break, so we're going to take a quick moment for station announcements, and we'll be right back with the Business Breakdown.
So many of our daily activities are now made easier by using a computer and internet. Want to schedule a doctor's appointment or take a class? Check the final score for your favorite team. Life is easier when you do it all from home on your computer. To find out how you can get home internet that fits your budget, contact a digital navigator today at 216-307-6990. That's 216-307-6990. This message is brought to you by WOVU 95.9 FM, Our Voices United, a Burton Bell Carr community radio station.
All right, back again for a continuation of the business breakdown with your host, Dena Davis. And I am here with a special guest this week. I am here with Mr. Ben Szweda from Szweda Consulting. And we are, I think, hopefully showing a really good partnership between accounting and HR. What do you think, Ben?
We work closely all the time together.
I like it. I like it. Well, Ben, as we're thinking about where we are right now, we're very close to the end of the year. I mean, we've really only got maybe 8 weeks or so, a little over 8 or 9 weeks before we're set for end of year. And so that's obviously a really busy time for accounting. It's a really critical time for accounting. So give me some of the things that we should think about as business owners as we're starting to prepare and look at the year-end activities.
I would look at your profit and loss statement. Look at your P&L. Your tax preparer is going to need it, whether you're a partnership or filing a Schedule C based on some 1099 income that you had. You're going to need that document with your income and all of your expenses by category. So if you're using QuickBooks, which I would recommend, log in, look at the report, and just look for things that are weird looking. Are there negative numbers that shouldn't be there, right? You should have all positive numbers for income. Expenses should all be positive numbers. Nothing should be uncategorized. We don't want uncategorized assets, no uncategorized expenses or income. So if there's anything in those accounts, you'll need to recategorize them to something else. And no miscellaneous. We see that a lot as well. No other general expense is a popular, I think, default QuickBooks account that they put there in the chart of accounts, but that's not a good one to use either. So be specific. How specific is really up to you and what trends you want to track in your business. You don't want an account for just one thing, but you also don't want an account so large that it's not really differentiating your expenses. So review that report and make sure it's accurate, because that's basically going to turn into a good portion of your business tax return.
Let me ask a quick question, Ben. When you talked about the miscellaneous category and the other not otherwise specified category of things, what are some of the more common items that people misplace in those categories? I understand you shouldn't use them in general as much as you possibly can, but what are some of the miscategorizations you're seeing? Couldn't get it out.
I think a lot of times it starts with something that maybe you don't think is going to be as frequent of a purchase, but then it ends up being something that you're actually spending a lot of money on, and it just started in that account when it really was a one-off, but by the end of the year it isn't anymore. And so, I see a lot of things in there like that. Also, things that just don't belong there at all. People will put, payments on vehicle loans when the asset and loan weren't booked properly. There won't be anywhere else to put them, so they'll be lumping them into this account when really those need to be on the balance sheet, not the P&L. So there's usually a lot of fun things that I find in that account that sometimes require a bit more work than just picking a new account, but that's one of the first few accounts I'll always pick on when looking at someone's P&L.
Well, you're also making me think of another critical part of what we're talking about, which is bookkeeping. And, let's talk a little bit about that in terms of some of the things that I think what I believe is, like you said, a lot of people, things are going so quickly, you're spending, you're doing these things. And I actually even had a friend of mine a couple of weeks ago. She said, I don't even really care what I'm spending because I'm just going to write it off anyway. And I said, well, in my mind, my eyes are kind of, whoa, well, that's kind of an interesting perspective.
Money saved is better than a deduction.
Well, what are some of the best ways for people to keep their books up to date? Now, of course, we know bookkeepers, but I'm sure there's some other due diligence that we should be keeping in mind, because that's all going to lead into, like you said, accurate reporting, and that accurate reporting helps the whole process at the end.
It helps the process at the end, but it really should help you run your business. It's not only for tax prep. So if we're just doing 12 months of bookkeeping all at once so we can do a tax return, you're really missing out on the value that the information truly can provide. So I would really recommend doing bookkeeping monthly, quarterly, but getting it into QuickBooks, categorizing it, getting your reports accurate so you can look at them and catch things while you still have time to do something about them. If you find out at the end of the year that your expenses in one category were trending up, well, it's too late to do anything about it. You've already spent the money. So monthly bookkeeping is very important. I have clients that do their own categorizing of their transactions, and I will just take a look at it monthly, quarterly, maybe do the reconciliations to make sure that there isn't a problem growing, so we catch it before year end. But the clients that are doing the best are the ones looking at these reports and actually using them, not just for tax prep.
And I'm so glad that you brought that up, because one of the things I see and I hear so often, especially with smaller and startup businesses, is there's such a push to do certain types of activities, especially when you're starting off. And I'm just really surprised at how many people do not have basic accounting knowledge.
Yeah, a lot of people, I see it all the time. They are specialists in their industry, whatever their business is. Maybe they were an employee in that business for someone else, and then they started their own company. So they're great at that. But, you have to surround yourself with the professionals that can do the other tasks. I don't try and do my own SEO and website stuff. Maybe I could do some of it, but it would just take me too much time. So I hire a professional to do that for me. So likewise, if, whatever your business is, if you're the one doing the SEO, do that very well, and, hire someone else to, look over the numbers as the months go along. Right.
So if we would talk about tip number one, and this would be some really good advice for my friend, which I'll make sure she gets a link to this segment. This is not just about filling out the forms, being compliant, filing your taxes, more of the transactional side of things. There's a lot more insight. There's a lot more consultation. There are decisions that you can be making that are more informed with the data that you have. And that's, again, one of the other things I love so much about finance and HR, accounting and HR, is we're kind of viewed very similarly. Whereas on my end, people view me for transactions, and they're like, oh, okay, well, you're HR and I need the form and I need this. And I'm like, well, I don't know what you're talking about, because that's not a standard process. That's something that's an output of a decision that we made. And the very same thing, I think, a lot of times in the accounting world, where, again, they're thinking of it as just the tax return, or I only have to file this, or, I have to have enough information to send to the bank for a loan, or, it's kind of short-sighted, I think, a lot of times, especially when we're starting off. So what are some ways we can kind of break those misconceptions and have people be a little bit more mindful of some of those decisions they're making?
Definitely. I agree. The compliance tasks, the bookkeeping, the transaction categorizing, we want to get those over and done with as quickly as possible. That's not where we add value. That's not where your accountant can really shine. We want to get those things done. And thankfully, a lot of technology is helping us do them faster and in a more automated way. Because when we're done with those, then we can really help. Maybe we see your income is really increasing this year compared to last year, so we need to work on some estimated tax for you, or we need to do some strategy to help you save some money. But we can't start that. We don't even know it needs to be done unless we have updated reports that we can look at. So there's a lot more value in the advising, but we can't begin the advising until the bookkeeping and the basic things are done first.
But wait a minute, Ben. I think you just said something very profound. So you mean that accountants just aren't cookie cutters and clones of each other that just go from client to client, just kind of applying the same things over, that you actually have value in giving advisement to specific circumstances? Oh.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
And, this is the difference from a bookkeeper to an accountant, because the bookkeeping part is pretty similar. But when you get into the nuances of a particular industry, it's useful to find an accountant that really knows that industry, that really knows the type of business, whether it's an S corp or a Schedule C, because they're going to have different tax things going on. So it's important to find someone who actually is familiar with those and can make recommendations, as the year is going on. So you don't have surprises, so you don't owe more than you were planning to owe at the end of the year.
Yeah. And, you make me think of a couple of good HR tips too, is hire the right people with the right skills. Because like you said, a bookkeeper is different than an accountant, and understand the difference between the two of them, because that helps you to understand how to leverage the expertise that they're bringing to you in a more effective way, and I think that's a really good point, because again, a lot of times, same thing in HR, is people just think that it's just this big kind of glob of stuff that people do, and they don't realize that there's actual specialties within those areas. And when they do their org charts or they're starting off, they're just like, okay, I need this person or I need that person. But really, you need a bookkeeper and you need an accountant, right?
Right. And that's what's great about outsourcing when you're a small business, because you don't need, nor probably can you afford, to hire a full-time person for each of those roles. So when you hire a firm instead, well, all those people are there and you can get a little bit of their time as you need it. And really access that higher level of professionalism that you don't have in your office every day.
That's correct. I appreciate that. Well, Ben, we are getting close to the end of our time. I want to give you an opportunity to share your information with our guests. And what's the best way that they can get in touch with you if they have some accounting questions?
Yes, whether bookkeeping or tax questions, I'd be happy to help you out. Our website is szwedaconsulting.com, and we are on all the social media pages as well, Facebook and LinkedIn, at that same Szweda Consulting name.
Sure thing. And can you spell your last name for the guests so we make sure we search it correctly in Google?
Yes, it is SZWEDA consulting.com.
Awesome. Well, hey, Ben, this has been great. As always, I enjoy these conversations with you and looking forward to more. I appreciate your time. Thank you to all of our guests, and take care.
Thanks, Dena.
Thank you. WOVU LP Cleveland.